Hey everyone, welcome back to HypnoVision Studios. Today we are going to be breaking down parts out of Neville Goddard's Out of This World, Thinking Fourth Dimensionally. I'll read a little bit from the book and then I will give you some personal experiences that I have had since listening and reading this book. Now, I will share with all of you out there that I am a very big Neville Goddard fan and I do like his audiobooks because I find that I can multitask and listen to not only just his books, but a variety of other books because it is the fastest way to learn. So, chapter 1 starts off with fourth dimensional thinking and explaining exactly what it is. And now I have told you before it come to pass, that when it is come to pass, ye might believe. This is from John 14:29. Neville goes on to say, many persons, including myself, have observed events before they occurred. That is, before they occurred in this world of three dimensions. Since man can observe an event before it happens in three dimensions of space, life on this earth proceeds according to plan. And this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be moving slowly through our space. If the occurring events were not in this world when they were observed, then to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world. And guys, I am being hit with a extreme radiation of chills because, quite honestly, this is the imagination. The imagination, I've said many times, is the true time traveler. By the very act of using my imagination, I can close my eyes regardless of what is going on in the outside world. I can travel to any time, any place, any event, past, present, or future through the eye of my mind, the mental eye of the mind, I as in imagination, and travel in any dimension, quite literally out of this world. Let's proceed. A predetermined event from the point of view of man awakened in a three-dimensional world. Thus the question arises, are we able to alter the future? And I will tell you that is an absolute yes. My object in writing these pages is to indicate possibilities inherent in man. I want to hone in on something real fast. Inherent. We use the word inheritance, right? When somebody in a family passes away, they leave what? An inheritance. I inherited a bunch of money from my late uncle or my aunt, for example. Inherit is things that are within us, but also things that we can inherit from the outside world. To show that man can alter his future, but thus altered, it forms again a deterministic sequence starting from the point of interference, a future that will be consistent with the alteration. The most remarkable feature of man's future is its flexibility. It is determined by his abilities rather than by his acts. The cornerstone of which all things are based is man's concept of self. He acts as he does and has the experiences that he does because his concept of himself is what it is, and for no other reason. This is quite honestly what Neville is saying here is how do we see ourselves? See, most of us, including myself, up into a certain point of becoming self-aware of the conscious aspects of our being, only have the perception of the outside world, what we can see, what we can touch. What we cannot see, we have trouble to believe in. What we have not had experiences in is unknown to us, and therefore it is hard for us to visualize, imagine that which we have no first-hand experience in. Therefore, we build our understanding of the world around us on our past experiences. But the future has unlimited possibilities, And by understanding that is the unknown, then we have the power by imagination and self-awareness to change the course of our history. We can quite literally alter our history. We do not have to stay on the path that our father stayed on, our mother stayed on, our generational bloodlines have stayed on. We don't have to do what other people have done. We don't have to stay where we are because of security, right? Most people have spent a lifetime working one job their entire life in hopes to have a 401k and retirement someday when their body is old and worn out. Most people work an entire life just to have insurance and to have a week or two of vacation, to live for the weekend. But I'm telling you today, that does not have to be your future, because through the power of awareness, through the power of your imagination and your sheer will of desire, you can alter and change your future and create anything you so desire. So I'm not going to read the whole book to you because it is absolutely copyrighted. So I'm going to read some excerpts from this book and give some commentary as we go along. Now, one thing I really want to point out to all of you out there, all changes take place in consciousness. The future, although prepared in every detail in advance, has several outcomes. At every moment of our lives, we must have our conscious choice to choose. There are two outlooks on the world possessed by everyone, a natural focus and a spiritual focus. The ancient teachers called one the cardinal mind, the other the mind of Christ. The mind of Christ. Now, in other books, Neville calls the imagination Christ, the Christ within. And the reason I truly believe that Neville refers to the imagination as Christ is because of those crystals in the pineal gland, those tiny microcrystals that create electricity. And this makes perfect sense when we understand the root etymology of the word Jesus, Zeus, and all of the mythological meanings behind this stuff. Zeus, the god of thunder, the god of lightning. The mythology is quite clear here. But the imagination, you are created in the image of God. So the electrical impulses of the mind that are coming from the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, which is the chemicals. I find this all to be very fascinating, and I learned this firsthand through practice of celibacy and abstinence for close to 3 years now. I've really had my eyes open to a lot of things, and I would not be telling you this if it were not true. In fact, in a few minutes, I will give you a few firsthand experiences where I had dreams about stuff that did in fact come to pass. And others, once I had those dreams, I decided to alter my future and go around these events so they would not come to pass. Let's move on. We may differentiate them as ordinary waking conscious governed by our senses. Our senses is that 5 sensory input. Have you ever heard someone say, well, that just doesn't make sense to me? Well, there's a combination of the 5 senses, which gives us the 6th sense. Yes, there was a movie called that, The Sixth Sense. And yes, it's kind of glamorized for movies, for theater, for play. But in all actuality, there's a lot of truth to this. We recognize these two distinct centers of thought in a statement. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, for they are spiritually discerned. Now, if you watched my last video where I spoke about torus fields, the Torah and tarot, we are actually talking about electromagnetism. And that makes perfect sense. If there is electricity coming off of that pineal gland, if there are electrical thoughts darting around the mind, then electromagnetism makes perfect sense here. The natural view confines reality to the moment we call now. Now is the present moment. Now is all we really experience. As I said before, through the imagination, we can travel to any time, place, or plane of existence. However, many of us do this on a daily basis, but we are unaware that we are doing it. What do I mean? This is a form of disassociation. Perhaps you're at work and you don't want to be there, and all you can seem to think about is what you're going to do when you get off of work. Maybe it's a Friday afternoon and you're going somewhere on Saturday, and that's all you can seem to find yourself fixated on. While your body is present at work, your mind is off thinking about the upcoming trip that you're going to take. This is indeed a form of using your imagination to travel in another dimension that is out of this world. Very interesting. The spiritual view, on the other hand, sees the contents of time. It sees events as distinct and separated as objects in space. The past and the future are the present whole to the spiritual view. What is mental and subjective to the natural man is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. The habit of seeing only that which our senses permit renders us totally blind to what otherwise we could see. To cultivate this faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately detangle our minds from the evidence of our senses and focus our attention on the invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it is distinctiveness of reality. What does this mean? Detangle our minds. As I've said many times on this channel, our focus can be externalized. We are still seeing the outside world through our first person view, but we are paying attention to what this person's doing over here, paying attention to that person, comparing ourselves to this, comparing ourselves to that, saying, oh, it must be nice. This person over here, I wish I had their life. I wish I could be like this person. I wish I could do this. We never actually learn to see ourselves until we learn to become aware of ourselves. It is quite literally looking into the mirror and seeing yourself as if you were having an outer body experience, coming face to face with yourself and being able to see that which is not seen from your first person view. Only people on the outside of you have that viewpoint of you. Think about this. If it were not for mirrors, if it were not for a reflection on water, would man ever truly know what his face looks like? Of course, this camera is recording me right now, but I have never seen my own face with my natural eyeballs. No man or woman on this planet ever will. The only means that we have to see ourselves is through these means of reflection, off of a mirror, off of water, off of a camera lens. So to see things that are unseen is to be able to see the contents within your own mind and within your own imagination. You are created in the image of God. This is why Jesus said, I am my Father are one. This also is why Neville refers to the Christ mind. Others say the Christ consciousness. The crystals, the Christ, the crystals in the pineal gland, the Jesus Christ, the Christos, which is the oil that travels up and down the spinal cord, the oil, the anointed oil. It's all right there, but it is within you. And this is why through many religious circles, there is the quotation of Jesus, the kingdom is within you. First, you must learn how to see yourself. And this has a lot to do with attention. Attention is the bridge to the unseen. And if our attention is always looking, then how can we see ourselves? How can we know for ourselves if we have not learn to do self-reflection, to see the contents of our own mind. This is kind of off topic, but the book of Revelation, many people think about all the terrible stuff that will come to pass on earth in the book of Revelation. But I quite honestly, through this experience of learning self-awareness and learning how to see myself and the contents of my own imagination, I realized the book of Revelation, if I go around angry at the world, if I go around creating a bunch of chaos and conflict around me, I am quite literally myself creating those type conditions that we read about in the book of Revelations. It's very interesting. We see how man has hatred in his heart, the things that he does to other people, treating them as below human, less than, not worthy of the same treatment as others because of their material possessions. Is that not someone who's physically attached themselves spiritually to the physical plane of existence via their emotions, which is why their emotions are all over the place? There are not any contents within. They have placed everything on the outside of them, out of this world. Earnest concentration through focused in a particular direction shut out the other sensations and cause them to disappear. There you have it. Earnest concentration, thought focused in a particular direction, shuts out other sensations and causes them to disappear. We can take our 5 sensory input and shut it off. Yes, it's not easy at first. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. You can be so attuned to everything on the outside world where you can literally feel someone before they walk into a room. But you can also shut that off and learn to feel yourself from the inside out. This is what it means that my emotions are running over. My cup has run over. I have overfilled my emotions until they spill out of my cup. If I am in emotional debt, then my cup is empty. I must rely on others to give to me. And this brings meaning to the statement, I shall lend and not borrow. It makes a lot of sense to me now when I sit here and think about it. We have but to concentrate on the state desired in order to see it. You've seen me get hit with chills, and you've seen me show you guys before. I've been practicing this for 3 years now. Focusing on the feeling, focusing on what it means to live from the end. That simply means to learn to control your emotional states from the internal self, from the mind to the body, from the body back to the mind, from the mind to the body. We are sending thoughts down into the body, and then we are getting the reflection or the response. Neville says that we filter the outside world through our emotional states. If I can learn to focus on one emotional state at a time, then I can learn to experience what these different states are. But most importantly, we have to become aware of this first. If we are unaware, we can find ourselves in these patterns where we are in this dominant energy. What does that mean? If we are a high-stressed person, then likely we will continue to find ourselves in those type states because we are unaware that we are doing this. It is only when we learn to focus on ourselves and shut out the sensory of the outside world that we can control the internal states, which then changes the reflection. If you were to go stand in front of a mirror, the mirror is going to show you exactly what is shown in front of it. The mirror will not change. If you step away from the mirror, change your shirt, and then step back in front of the mirror, then and only then can the mirror show you a different image. This is what we are talking about when we say you are created in the image of God. The imagination is the Christ. This is where that connection between the pineal gland and that pituitary gland happens, and there's a 3-day waiting period. This is when that seed travels up the spinal cord, that oil goes all the way up and it sits dormant for 3 days before it starts to move again. And it is parted by the Red Sea, 2 halves of the brain. The pineal gland has been referred to many times as the seat of God or the seat of the soul. And even Nikola Tesla claimed to speak to God, and many people mocked him. Nikola Tesla was also very fond of crystals. It's all been hidden right in plain sight. In fact, the controllers of this world really don't want the mass public to know this, because this would take away their ability to control you through your sensory input, through the theft of your attention. This is quite literally breaking the bridge and creating the illusion of separation, because it has magnetized your attention to the outside world so that you cannot pay attention to yourself. I speak this in earnest truth to all of you. We have but to concentrate on the state desired in order to see it. The habit of withdrawing attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on the invisible develops our spiritual outlook and enables us to penetrate beyond the world of sense and to see that which is invisible. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Romans 1:20. This vision is completely independent of the natural facilities. Open it and quicken it. Without it, these instructions are useless, for the things of the Spirit are spiritually discerned. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Desire is the mainspring of action. We could not move a finger unless we had a desire to move it. We could not move a finger unless there was a desire to move it. I want you all to think about this real deeply for just a minute. You could not move a finger unless there was a desire. How many times or how many things do we do without really thinking? So desire is the root of everything. To desire to walk across the room means you must take steps. You must get up. You must walk across the room. And how many steps have been calculated from point A to point B? How many spaces are there in between those steps? You see, the creation is already complete. We need not think about these things. We need not worry how, because the why is our desire. There are so many times in life we as humans can get caught up in overthinking. How is this going to happen? How is that going to happen? How? But it really does not matter if we know our why. Y is but one axis, and X marks the spot. If I were to make a metaphor out of living from the end, then I would say that is the X on the map. X marks the spot, the living from the end. I need not worry how to get there because I know why. And my why is going to carry me to that X. That is 2 dimensions, a point from one point to another point. And we will get to that in just a minute. The desires which impel us to action are those that hold our attention. A desire is but an awareness of something we lack or need to make our life more enjoyable. Desires always have some personal gain in view. The greater the anticipated gain, the more intense is the desire. There is no absolute unselfish desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire and no consequential action. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The key to progress in life and to the fulfillment of dreams lies in a ready obedience to its voice. Unhesitating obedience to this voice is an immediate assumption of the wish fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. As Pascal said, you would not have sought me out had you not already found me. By assuming the feeling of his wish fulfilled and living and acting on this conviction, man alters the future in harmony with his assumption. That's truly amazing. When I started this channel 3 years ago, much of this stuff I had recently discovered at the time. I was still trying to wrap my head around concepts like everyone is you pushed out. To live from the end, what does that mean? What is a spiritual man? What is a natural man? What is the Christos old? There were so many questions that I had within. There are so many different religions on this planet, so many different belief systems. And Neville says that everything is commentary. This is why we need not generate feelings based upon people on the outside of us in ways that are unkind, in ways that we would assume the feeling internally in our body. Let's say, for example, I do not like this person over here, and then I start to generate feelings of hatred in myself because of this person over here. Again, who pays the price? If I don't like this person, do they experience those feelings? Or am I projecting my feelings from my internal state onto that person? And the reflection is the feeling that I am inhabiting inside of my body. Likewise, if I look at a person with loving eyes, then I fill myself with the emotions, eventually releasing the correspondence, the law of correspondence here, guys, the corresponding chemicals such as oxytocin, such as serotonin, such as dopamine, the feel-goods of the hormones. If we flip that on its head for just a minute and go back to the hatred aspect of things, stress, raising the cortisol in the body, this creates extreme damage to the internal workings of the body. It creates more tension and tensile strength. Have you ever seen steel so tough that it is brittle? It is so strong, but if you hit it or tap it just right, it shatters. That strength is only there because of the tension that it is under. Much like a glass on a car. You can walk up to a car and hit it with a baseball bat, and nothing will happen to the glass. But if you go to the corner of the glass with a screwdriver and twist it just right, you can shatter the whole glass with a lot less force. So this is what I'm talking about. The tension inside of the body distorts the image of the reflection in our imagination. Our feelings are quite literally the internal state of our emotions. If we allow ourselves to not try to control the outside world by force, then much like that screwdriver breaking the window, we don't need to take a bat and try to go around and beat everything into form. We can do it with little bit of energy instead of trying to force things into conformity. So I'm going to jump down a little bit into this book a little bit farther. It is important always to remember that the proposed action must be one which follows the fulfillment of your desire. And also, you must feel yourself into the action until it has all the vividness and distinctiveness of reality. For example, suppose you desired a promotion in office. Being congratulated would be an event you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. Having selected this action, as the one you wish to experience in imagination. Immobilize the body and induce a state akin to sleep. Now, guys, this is pretty much meditation. How many people will sit in the recliner and kind of doze off while watching TV? This is pretty much it. We are in that state where we are still conscious, but we are unconscious. What I mean is our body becomes so relaxed, our mind is still operating in the conscious state, but we have become relaxed, releasing that tension, that tensile strength. When we release the tension in the body, then we can experience things through the imagination that otherwise would cause us to tense up, would cause us to start to change the reflection in the mirror. When the body is calm, we are able to see the reflection more clearly. It is almost like when we create tension in the body, we are warping the mirror and our vision becomes distorted. Do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of space and at a distance in point of time, being congratulated on your good fortune. This is very important. Instead, make elsewhere here and the future now. The future event is a reality now in a dimensionally larger world. And oddly enough, now in a dimensionally larger world is equivalent to here in the ordinary three-dimensional space of everyday life. This takes us back to the disassociation that happens with our imagination. What Neville is saying here is through that imagination, we are able to visualize the future event before it happens, but it is all happening within the human body in the here and now, in the 3D plane of things. By 3D, these are things that we can touch physically. When light hits something, for example, creates a shadow, as you can see, different objects in this room are creating shadows because they are blocking the light from passing through it. Pass through. The light cannot pass through the matter. We, as humans, are matter. As light enters into our eyeballs through the retina and converted into matter. By that, we start to understand that we are indeed light beings because we are converting light into matter, but that same very light creates a shadow because what is gone into the body has now become dense matter, and then the rest of the sunlight that has not entered into our body cast a shadow onto the ground behind us based upon our orientation with the light either from the sun or in a room or a specific area. I'll try to put some graphics in this video that show a bunch of sacred geometry shapes that it appears to be one shape in the 3D form, but when you cast light onto it, it creates a multi-dimensional shape. And this is quite literally what happens inside of our imagination. Take this for example. If you can imagine something so large in your imagination that physically could not fit between the space in your skull, you can imagine things so large that it's physically impossible for it to fit inside of your head. This is fourth dimensional thinking. Fifth dimensional thinking is the dimensions of the five senses. You got 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension, 4, and 5. Those 5 dimensions are the external input from those 5 senses. The fourth dimension is how we create mental images inside of our head, the mind's eye or imagination. It's very fascinating when you start to awaken to just how magnificent the human body is, meaning you, because that means you, the watcher, the viewer. You are truly amazing. You are truly magnificent, and you are out of this world. That's how special you are. So, man, through his imagination, can create mental pictures, but he can also create motion pictures inside of his head. If you were to go back to getting the office promotion, for example, you, by the very acts and will and desire to create that image inside of your head of being congratulated, being promoted, and it has not happened yet, but you are experiencing that in the here and now. And then from that internal vision, you fill yourself with the emotions as if you are being congratulated, as if you are feeling what it must feel like to have the admiration from your coworkers, the congratulations, job well done. This is how the internal workings of feelings and emotions and thought come together to create our reality, ultimately creating our personality, personal reality. I give that one to Dr. Joe Dispenza because it is absolutely true. Your personal reality creates your personal reality. If you go around and complain about everything, then you will find more things to complain about. If you go around blaming things for the circumstance that you find yourself in, then you will be constantly circled by those stances, and you will be standing in the center. So through the power of awareness, you have the choice, not just any choice, you have conscious choice to use that imagination to shift your internal emotions and to change how your body is being filled internally. And that is nothing less than a miracle in the making. Neville goes on to say to continue to re-experience this until it becomes reality through the persistence of imagining. Many people give up. Many people might try it one time. This is much like people who make New Year's resolutions, right? And then a month or two in, those resolutions have faded into the background. But it is the sheer persistence of certain individuals that are just like clockwork. They are able to hold on to that vision in their mind and repeat it daily until it becomes reality. Many people are very successful at doing this. And many people actually do this, but they are unaware, they are unconscious that they are doing it. So man does have the ability to change his future, to shift his reality into a different state entirely. It is absolutely possible. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the fourth dimensional thinking here, and to understand how man molds his future in harmony with his assumption, we must know what it means when we say dimensionally. A dimensionally larger world, for it is to a dimensionally larger world that we go to the altar of future. The observation of an event before it occurs implies that the event is predetermined from the point of view of man in his three-dimensional world. Therefore, to change the conditions here in the three dimensions of space, we must first change them in the four dimensions of space. So to change the outside world, to change your circumstance, first you must change it internally. Fourth dimensionally just really rings a bell here because for so long on this channel, I've been talking about the fourth house, the fourth chakra in the chakra systems. If I'm not mistaken, this is 444, and that is a repeating number of 3, 6, and 9, which ties that all the way back to Nikola Tesla and numerology, the fourth dimension of thinking. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world, and would no doubt deny the existence of a dimensionally larger self. He is quite familiar with the three dimensions of length, width, and height. And he feels that if there were a fourth dimension, it should be just as obvious to him as the dimensions of length, width, and height. A dimension is not a line. It is any way in which a thing can be measured. So this is, for example, we start at a point being point A, or we could call that dot 1. When we draw a line to another point, we could say point B. Then this is, by definition, one dimension. When we go from A to B to C, now we have created an additional dimension. That is, to measure a solid fourth dimensionally, we simply measure it in any direction except that of its length, width, and height. Is there any other way of measuring an object other than those of its length, width, and height? Time measures my life without employing the three dimensions of length, width, and height. There is no such thing as instantaneous objects. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It endures for a definite length of time. We can measure its lifespan without using these dimensions. The more dimensions an object has, the more sustainable and real it becomes. A straight line which lies entirely in one dimension acquires shape, mass, and substance by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give which would make it just as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces and surfaces are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. The new quality is changeability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we obtain a line. And by bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is but a cross-section of a line, which is in turn but a cross-section of a surface, which is in turn but a cross-section of a solid, which is in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, but a cross-section of a fourth dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are but a cross-section of fourth-dimensional bodies, which means when I meet you, I meet a cross-section of the fourth-dimensional you, the fourth-dimensional self that is not seen. I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them all as coexisting simultaneously. My focus should take in the entire array of sensory impressions which you have experienced on Earth, plus those you might encounter. I should see them not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as a present whole. Because change is the characteristic of fourth dimensions, I should see them in a state of flux as a living, animated whole. If we have all this clearly fixed in our minds, what does it mean to us in a three-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along time's length, we can see the future and alter it as we so desire. This world, which we think so solidly real, is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may pass at any time. Wow. So guys, I'm going to pause here and I want to kind of break that down. The shadow that we might at any time pass. For some reason, the first time I heard that, I kept thinking about the valley of the shadow of death. That really kind of resonates with me because, as I said earlier, like you can see the shadows in the room behind me, And we can walk outside, and when the sunlight hits us, we can see our shadow on the ground. That is coming from the sunlight. And it's very interesting. I've done videos recently about how sunlight increases the serotonin within the human body. Serotonin is one of those, get it, four chemicals. 4 is such an interesting number here because it keeps repeating in my personal life. And therefore, through my personal experiences, it has been a repeating number on this channel. 4 is a very interesting number. But the concepts of the fourth dimensional thinking, meaning inside of our imagination, we can experience time differently. Suppose when you're at work and you find yourself wanting to be somewhere else, you fall out of the flow of the activity that work requires you to be doing. This is when we disassociate. This is when we start to think about the trip that we're going to have this weekend, and we start to pay attention to the clock. We start to really focus. Wow, 1 minute feels like an hour. 30 seconds feels like 30 minutes. Time seems to change and slow down as we give our focus and attention to it. We are attending to time. Therefore, it must slow down. Yet, when we find ourselves in what is known as autotelic flow, when we are enjoying the experience, we are not paying any attention to time, and therefore it disappears. It dissipates from our awareness. There have been many experiences by many people where time simply shifts and we lose track of it. A whole day can go by and suddenly, wow, today really went by. I can't believe it's already time for bed. This is what I'm talking about. When we pay attention to time, we are actually given our focus. We are given our attention to time. And therefore, we rob ourselves of the flow of the experience. This is likened to many of the times when I've said that the dancer and the music becomes one. The dancer is no longer thinking about dancing. The dancer is the dance. The dancer is the music. The dancer is the experience. They're no longer worried about, oh my gosh, there's so many people here. If I mess up, will they laugh at me? If I mess up, so many of these people will see me. No, the dancer is lost in the music, one with it, fully animated by those electrical impulses flowing through their body. Those electrical impulses are animating the muscles, causing them to tense up and release in a beautiful flow of art. This is animation of the body. It's very, very fascinating, very miraculous. It's truly a miracle that through electricity, God gave us the ability to animate our bodies in such a degree that we are both aware and unaware at the same time. We are both living in the present. We are also living in the past and the future. We are living in many dimensions simultaneously. That is truly hard for most people when they first start to learn this information to wrap their heads around. And even for those such as myself who have had a few years, there are still times where I am finding myself really hard to really grasp it. Because through the awareness, we can be pulled off into one direction or pulled off into another direction. This is why I say, like the New Year's resolutions, to form a vision and to be able to anchor yourself into that vision and repeat it daily until it becomes reality. As where other people may make a resolution, but within that month or two, that resolution has then faded. Much in the way that time fades away when we are no longer giving our focus and attention to it. So by change, we change the reflection in the mirror from the internal state. I literally go in front of the mirror with my shirt off, and now the mirror must show me without my outer shirt because there is no way that it can show that matter because matter blocks light, and our reflection is always showing us what is in front of that mirror, the image. So the mirror is not going to show you in a winter coat if it's summer and you have a t-shirt on. It's just not possible. So the reflection that is always coming back to us is a reflection of our inner state. This is the as above, so below, as within, so without. The mirror is always going to show you a true reflection. And it is through man's own denial of his five senses that he tries to force things. And when you force something, there is an opposing and equal force applied. This is a very hard lesson learned for some people, including myself. While I understand the concept, there have been times through the past few years where I did find myself able to completely let go of things and just allow them to pass. While other things, there was the letting go, but then turning around and grabbing back onto it, and then letting go and then turning around and grabbing back onto it. Change can absolutely be scary at times. At times, we want the change, but we fear change because change requires us to let go of the past. If we were to use the analogy of the movie Groundhog Day, well, Bill Murray's character kept reliving the same day over and over and over. It is very much true and scientifically proven that the brain has 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those thoughts are from the previous day and the day before and the day before. So if we were continuing to hold on to all of these, then the contents of our mind becomes full, and it becomes a repeating pattern of the same thoughts every single day, just recycling the same ones over and over. This is much like watching reruns on TV. There's nothing else on, so I'm going to watch this movie again and again and again. I'm going to keep telling myself the same story over and over and over and over. And I keep getting the same results over and over. I keep going in front of the mirror with the same outfit on. It keeps showing me this same reflection. And that is truly amazing to really understand and grasp how you can internally change and therefore change your future. You can, through your imagination, think about anything of the future because it has not happened. The past is just that. It is something that has passed through us. And if we are matter, meaning the body is made of matter, I think it's in the Bible, I'm not sure if it's Genesis, where God made man from the dirt of the earth and then breathed life into man. Breath of life, the ether, the air. Static electricity exists in the air, in the molecules. Water can transform from a fluid into a vapor. And then from a vapor, it can transform into a solid, yet it is still a form of water. But through the vapor and the air mixture, it can travel into our lungs. So there is a static charge within the ether. Electromagnetism. The unseen forces of magnets. You know that it's there. You can witness the effects of magnets. You cannot change magnets. You cannot create magnets. You can only observe and witness the effects of magnets. Therefore, man, since he can witness what a magnet can do, he believes in what magnets can do. Much like static electricity on the hair, we know that it causes it to stand up even though we can't see it with our physical eyes. We know that it's there. So magnetism is always working. It is always at play. And this is so important. When we go into meditation, you will often hear breath work as being one of the central focuses. To start to breathe deeply all the way in. Deep breaths. And when we do it intentionally, we are breaking that chain of the cardinal mind. And then we are allowing us to go into the other side of the Christ mind, the creative mind, the right side. Cast your net to the right and be fishers of men. The creative mind. The creative mind does not worry about how. The logical mind is always second guessing. Have you ever seen where the two halves are at war with each other? This is like the old cartoons where you have the angel and you have the devil and they're whispering into each ear. Now the two halves of the brain are trying to communicate to each other and they are arguing with each other. If our chemicals become out of whack, then we are actually more distorted in our mental vision. Therefore, we find it hard to calculate, visualize, concentrate, and our attention goes all over the place. And where our focus goes, our energy flows. And by energy, it is our emotions. I'll give you some examples before I end this video. A few years ago, I had a dream about a green eye. I've spoke about this on my channel a couple times now. In that dream, at first it seemed like an aura. I woke up and I looked across the room and all I could see was green. I sat there in the bed for a few minutes. And as I sat there, I kind of dozed back off and then I cracked my eyes open again and it looked more like a green eye. Well, as it turns out, a few months later, a sign appeared in my hometown. The sign read, "The perfect sight," and it was a big, beautiful green eye. Neville speaks in Out of This World about man seeing and witnessing things before they happen. This seems like a supernatural event. It seems like something some people would not believe if I were to tell them. But in fact, there are people around me that I told about the dream, and then the sign appeared. So while not needing to prove anything, I do have witnesses, and I find that to be very fascinating. This goes back to Neville speaking about the physical man and the spiritual man, because the physical man cannot receive what the spiritual man does because the spiritual man receives from God. Yet the physical man does not understand this, the cardinal mind versus the Christ mind or the Christ conscious. Dreams do indeed tell us things. And when someone focuses onto another person with such intensity, that projection goes out. We are sending signals out through the ether of air. You know this is true because your cell phone right now is receiving a wireless signal. Nikola Tesla wanted to give the world free energy. Free energy or 0-point energy starts in the human mind, in the center of the universe, the pineal gland. And from there, we send thought vibrations out. We project outwardly, and then the reflection comes back. This is a two-way street. So there are some people who are direct with their communication, while others have this equal give and take. This is how I understood what it meant to be empathic. The incoming path. What is coming back to me? If I start to assign my feelings onto someone else, then I am projecting how I feel onto that person. If I start looking at that person and say, wow, they are a sick person. Wow, they are a negative person. Wow, you cannot change someone until you change the concept of yourself, as Neville says. And I find this to be very enlightening, which is why in my last video, I talked about the black sun and I talked about the dark night of the soul. When we go inward with our attention and we focus on ourselves and we start to understand the energy dynamics within the human body, a lot of stuff starts to become revealed to us. We become aware of a lot of things. So after an ego death, guess what has to happen? Much like ripping your fingernail off. It hurts like hell at first, but then the healing process begins. But it takes time. As Neville says, it takes time to grow a new shell on your fingertip. Ego is much in the same way. When you have an ego death, ego has to heal. It has to reform. The shell on the outside has to reform. It's like breaking the tension on the body, and the ego has shattered into pieces, and you are left with nothing but the spiritual self. The physical man, the physical understanding has passed, and a new one is reborn. Reincarnation of the physical cardinal mind has now started the transformation into a higher version of self. We raise the angle of daylight. As the sun moves across us, the shadow on the ground changes length because of the distance and angle angels of light. The shadow appears differently. So when we learn to see ourselves in a different concept, a higher version of ourselves, then the shadow aspect has to change, elongate in so many ways. The dark moon Lilith is the farthest point away, and that is why it's deeply hidden within our human experience. So the fourth dimensional thinking is absolutely an amazing thing. There is the duality of it, the good and the bad, because life is just that. We cannot know what we want if we have no idea what we don't want. Therefore, we have many different experiences in our life experience. This is how we learn to tap into that which we desire. We don't know what we desire until we experience what we don't desire. And with that, guys, I'm going to end this video here. But dreams do speak to you through symbolism. And if you learn to read sacred geometry, if you learn to decode sacred geometry, then you can understand when things are not in harmony. The opposite of harmony is called discord. If you are not in agreement with something, if it is not harmonious, then it is in a discord. When we look at music, we strike a chord. If there is no harmony, then it creates a distabled vibration. And if that is in the body, it becomes destructive. So through man's own best interest, to strike harmony within him, then he shall get the reflection and reap what he sows. So make sure to love yourself and to love others. And if you can't find it upon yourself to think lovingly of another, at the very, very least, be neutral about it. Take no position one way or the other. And that's what I've learned to do, because there are experiences that still remain in my own life that are not favorable in some areas. So instead of focusing and complaining about it, I've learned to just remain as neutral as I can. Give it no feeling, because the feeling is secret. And if I feel no way about it, then eventually it must pass. And with that, guys, I'll see you on the next one.